Hi. Hello, hello. No, sit down. No, sit over here, okay? No. Sit here. Okay, everybody has a book? Yes? Page 63. Sorry, the bar is closed today. As everybody knows, it's Shivos B'Tammuz, right?
That's why there's no water.
There's no water on the table, but if anybody needs a drink, then don't stop yourself. Okay? Okay. Okay. Okay, so today's the beginning of the 3 weeks, and these are known as Bein HaMitzorim. These 3 weeks are known as Between the Narrows. Sarim. It's 3 weeks between the narrows, right? And it's a tragic day. Five things occurred on this day. Let me just find what they are. Okay. So he says that this is from Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. There's a whole bunch of halachas here about it, and so we practice partial avelut, partial mourning, because the tzarot of the destruction of the temple began on this day. So we have 3 weeks until Tisha B'Av. So he says that everyone who fears heaven should do tikkun chatzos every day after midday. After midday, we don't do weddings during these 3 weeks. Even somebody who didn't fulfill the mitzvah of pru or bu yet doesn't get married during the 3 weeks, but you are allowed to make a shidduch, even with a meal, until Rosh Chodesh Av. From Rosh Chodesh Av and on, even though you're allowed to make a shidduch, you're not allowed to make a meal to celebrate it. Okay. Now, what are the things that happened during these? What happened on this day? Anybody remember?
Well, the walls around Yerushalayim.
The walls of Yerushalayim were breached, right? What else? You don't remember?
Somebody put an idol.
It was
in the temple.
an idol was put in the temple, right? And why can't I? Oh, here it is. Okay, 5 things happened. So the luchot were broken on this day. This is 40 days after Shavuos. When Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain, that was on Shavuos of B'Tammuz. The korban atomid, the daily sacrifice, was no longer offered. The walls of Yerushalayim were breached during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, and in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, the walls were breached on the 9th of Tammuz, but the second temple was on the 7th of Tammuz, and since the destruction of the second temple is more chamur to us, and Apostomus, the wicked Apostomus burned a Sefer Torah, and they put a tzelem, they put an idol into the sanctuary. And that brought about the destruction of the temple and the exile of the Eden. So, we're going to learn a little bit about this period right now, starting on page 63. So he starts off there with a quote from Eichel, Al Eila Ani Bochia, I'm crying over these. Eini Yalda Mayim, my eyes are shedding tears. Ki rachok mimeni menachem meishiv nafshi, because there's nobody around to comfort me and to restore my soul. If I forget you, Yerushalayim, let my right hand or my right side be forgotten. This is a pasuk from Tehillim. So פעם מישהו שאל אותי אם יש מקום אחד בעולם שיש בו מספיק מקום לכתוב את כל שמות ששת המיליונים. Somebody asked me, is there any place in the world that has got enough space to write the names of the 6 million? But Shuvah Rabotai hi מאוד pshuta. The answer is very simple. האם התפללתם פעם בכותל המערבי? Did you ever pray at the Kotel? כל השמות זוהרים שם כזוהר הרקיע. The names of the 6 million are shining there like the shining sky. Oh, the noise has stopped. We can open the window. Good. Can you open that window? This one? Just the one on the big one on the right. Yeah, just pull it open. It's not locked. Or you actually turn the handle to the right. Turn the handle to the right, clockwise. Okay, just pull it up. That's okay. That's perfect. Yeah. So, Reb Shlomo says that the names of the 6 million are all shining in the Kotel. So, how do you understand a statement like that? How do you understand that? Okay, obviously it's being poetic, but how do you understand it? You took literature.
Yeah.
You did, didn't you? like Shakespeare and Gang and all those guys, right? So explain.
How do we understand what? That the
When he says that the names of the 6 million are shining on the kotel.
It's a nice spot.
Okay, but we want to relate to it. So how are you going to relate to it?
People who die of Kiddush Hashem are not forgotten. Is that it?
Okay, but true. All that you're saying is true, but I'm still trying to relate. Why is he relating it specifically to the kotel?
Died of the Shechina.
Okay.
In their relationship with the Reb Shlomo was and shines into the light of where the Shechina is to reside.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear all of it.
The lives that they lived, or the lives that they could live, and their relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and being here in Olam Hazeh, shines on eternally in a place or at a place where tefillas are being brought to, and where the Shechina is supposed to reside.
Okay, and why is that?
Why is that relationship existing?
Why? So let's just fill in, because they died al Kiddush Hashem. You know what it means when we say that the 6 million died al Kiddush Hashem? Huh? Why do we say that they died al Kiddush Hashem?
They died because they were Jews.
Because they died, plain and simple, because they were Jews. Right? Give me that.
Something that says Shemot, their names.
Yeah.
Not like their souls, but their names.
Right. Well, somebody asked him, is there anywhere in the world that we could write the names of all the 6 millions? He said, yeah, their names are shining from there, right? But what I'm trying to get at is as follows. When you go to the kotel, what are you experiencing? What are you thinking about? Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I'm thinking about. I can just say the Amidah and actually think about what I'm saying, okay? But it's very amazing to see Reb Shlomo's consciousness. When he was at the kotel, and he says that the names of the 6 million are shining, that means to say that when he was there, he was conscious of them. Understand? He was conscious, like Baruch Hashem, I'm married to a very conscious person. It's like there are times like Judy will say something about, and that she was thinking about somebody, and I realized that wow, there are people that are actually conscious and they think about people and they think about things and so on. More than just like hey, can you pass the book or can you pass the milk or something like that. People are like if you were to draw like a circle around yourself of how far does your consciousness reach, right? So there are people that their consciousness reaches as far as their skin, and there are people that their consciousness reaches like 2 feet around them or 4 feet around them, and so maybe 8 feet around them, and so on. And I can just imagine, you're from New York, right? You rode the subways there, right? How conscious were you of the people on the subway car? As long as you were just watching out that nobody should bother you, right? But you also you're from there too. They even if you say hello to somebody, they look through you, right? Okay, but just to be conscious of when you're walking in the street, to be conscious of, oh, there's Moshe, there's this guy, I don't know his name, there's what's her name, and so on, right? Just to be conscious of them, like to take note of who they are and of their being. I have a friend, Mendel Bleichman. He's a Ram in Yeshiva's Keren B'Yavne in Shalabim actually, and she's in Keren B'Yavne. So his father was a Litvisher Rav in Europe. When they came to America, they they lived in Chicago. His father was a Rav in Kovna, I think. And his father was not a chassid. So when Mendel, they had 4 children. So Mendel was 12 maybe, and his brother was 11. And his father called up Rav Aaron Kotler saying, I want to send my kids to Lakewood because there's nobody left in Chicago that can teach them. Brilliant, genius kids, So Rav Aaron said, no, they're too young to come. They're too young to come to Lakewood. So he said, so what am I supposed to do? Where should I send them? So he said, send them to Lubavitch. And Reb Aaron was not a fan of Lubavitch at all. If you read what Reb Shlomo says about Reb Aaron and Lubavitch. And so his father said, what? Lubavitch, they're going to learn how to learn over there? So he said, no, but send them there for a couple of years, and there's Yiras Shemayim there. And then when they'll be older, then you'll send them to me. So Mendel comes to Reb Mendel, he was one of my rebbeim. He comes to Crown Heights, and he was in the school which was on Bedford and Stuyvesant. You know where that is?
Mm-hmm.
And he's there all of 2 weeks, and Sunday morning the principal calls him down. What's the problem? He says, there was a Farbrengen there yesterday. He said, I know, I was there. So he says, and the Rebbe saw you. You got to hear the story, Michal. Michal, you got to hear the story. The Rebbe saw you. So Mendel was like a fast-mouthed Litvish kid. He says, of course he saw me. I saw him too. Like I was at the Farbrengen. So he says, the Rebbe saw you, and he sent a message that he noticed that you're losing weight. Now, Reb Mendel had been in Crown Heights for all of 2 Shabbos. The first 2 Shabbos that he had been there, right? The Rebbe saw him twice in a big crowd, right? The Rebbe said, the Rebbe noticed that you're losing weight. The Rebbe sent a message that probably you're losing weight because you don't have the patience to eat your lunch properly because you want to go out and play the whole time, and so you're not washing the bread, and so that you don't have the bench. So you're probably just gulping your food down without bread, not eating a full meal, and that's why you're losing weight. The friend was like pretty amazed, the Rebbe figured all this out because it's exactly what he was doing. So the principal goes down and he says, and the Rebbe said that from now on, we're going to assign 2 bochurim who will sit with you during lunch and make sure that you wash the bread and eat your lunch and bench, and then you can go and play. Okay? So why am I telling you this story? I'm talking about being conscious. Being conscious of another person. Okay? I'm sure you've heard stories about the Rebbe sends a message to a shaliach in Australia, and he says, I'm glad you're doing all this work that you're doing in this community that you're in, but there are also Jews, and he would name, if you never heard such stories, he would name a location. And the shaliach, when he would get such a telegram or such a letter from the Rebbe, he understood, go to that town, right? And so this was a story with Rabbi Bronner, Olav Hashem. So he goes and gets on a train and goes to that town, doesn't know anybody there. All of a sudden, this Israeli couple come up to him. Oh, we're looking for a rabbi, and they had, both of them had grown up on Shomer HaTzair Kibbutzim. I don't know if you know about Shomer HaTzair. It's like an anti-religious kibbutz movement. And they had no interest, no concern for anything, for any Yiddishkeit while they were in Israel, but they're both academics, and they're here in this town teaching in university, and they got a little girl, and they, being among all these goyim, all these Gentiles, they're feeling a need for something Jewish. And they were saying to each other, oh, if only there was a rabbi that we could talk to. And here you are. He showed up. So he went to their house. He spent the day at their house, learning with them, talking with them, discussing with them, and then he went back home. A couple of months later, the new school season began, and his daughter says, Rabbi Groner's daughter says, there's a new kid in school. They just moved here from such and such a town. It was the girl of that Israeli couple. And from that one day, they decided they're moving to the Jewish community, even though they have to commute, etc., etc. So, how did the Rebbe know? How did the Rebbe know that there's a Yid crying in Canberra, Australia, or whatever it is? Okay, how did he know? How did he know that there's a Yid crying out in some African town, or So I'll tell you something amazing. The Holy Visioner said, if you don't feel the pain of a woman in labor in a radius of 300 kilometers, then you're not a rabbi. Okay? So, what Reb Shlomo is saying is, when you go to the Kotel, and even if you're not on this Madrega, even if we're not on this Madrega, on this level, when we go to the Kotel, it's good to sit down for a couple of minutes and to think about all the Yidden who've given their lives to connect with the Kotel. We just go there sometimes and give some tzedakah and say a few prayers and see a bunch of stones and some people have a very deep connection and some people don't really, right? And so to think about it, how much, what it means, how much we went through to be here at this Kotel, and do the 6 million have anything to do with it? But we learned it yesterday, right? When you're down to nothing, then the gates are open for everything. In other words, when somebody comes and says, "Oh, I'm they're sick or they're missing something or whatever it is," their gates are open to receive everything. Okay.
One goes through life like that, being conscious of one's surroundings.
Some people do, yeah. Some people do, and so for example, I once heard an explanation like when you're sleeping at night and it's a little bit chilly and the covers came off and you're feeling cold. Do you have to wake up to go looking for your blanket, or do you just instinctually pull it over your shoulders? You instinctually pull it over your shoulders. So the more connected you are to your neshama, the more instinctual your connection with other neshamas is as well.
So it becomes essential after a while.
The natural state of the neshama is to be connected to all other neshamas. The reason that you don't experience that, is because the neshama is in the body, and the body conceals. The body conceals the neshama, and covers up and drags the neshama in all kinds of other directions. But if we could learn to live with higher consciousness, okay, so that means that your neshama is liberated from the shackles of the body, and it's liberated to actually experience itself as a neshama. And as a neshama, it's like, let me put it this way. Michal, some old friend from Toronto walks in now. We used to be best friends, right? We used to have great times together. You thinking of somebody?
I think it's
Yeah. I want you to think, right now, a good old friend from Toronto walks in. Think of somebody. You don't have to tell me a name. Just think of one person.
It comes to mind.
Okay. And they come over, Michal. I'm so happy to see you. And you're smiling. What's your reaction? Don't tell me about it. Do it.
The only one from Toronto is you.
No, I'm from Montreal. I was in Toronto for 2 years in high school.
Well, a former friend.
A good friend walks in. Doesn't matter. That you haven't seen in a long time, and they come in. Oh, they're so happy to see you. Give them a hug back. It's like you're wired that way, right? Okay. Now.
I am. Yeah. After being here for 13 years, hugging all these things.
We didn't know that you have a comedian next door. Okay. Tell me your name again. Rachel. Rachel. So, a friend of yours walks in. Just yesterday, you asked her for a favor, and she said no. Right? She walks in right now, and you were pretty not so happy with the answer that you got. Okay? She walks in right now. Are you going to get up? Hey, Chana, I'm so happy to see you.
If I humble myself.
They didn't say, but the likelihood is, like I asked somebody for a favor, they didn't do it to me, and they were maybe even a little bit nasty, so you didn't get it up. You're not going to be so excited to see them, right? Why? Why? Why not? Shalom.
The last interaction that you had was not how you expected it to be.
Okay. Now, what if, page 63, what if you were truly connected with your neshama, right? And truly conscious of your neshama, and this friend, this person whom you asked for a favor, comes in and they didn't do you the favor, right? But you're really connected with your neshama. What's your reaction to them? You're allowed to talk also, huh? I'm a male, I'm allowed to talk. But in my house, you have permission. What's your reaction?
You're enthusiasm.
You're happy to see them because your neshama and this person's neshama are part of Hashem Echad, right? And it's totally natural that your neshama is happy to see another neshama. So why aren't we like that? Why aren't we like that? In other words, your soul is happy to see to see another soul, even though that person didn't do you a favor yesterday. You're not even thinking about it. You don't even remember that that they turned you down. You didn't even for a second judge them negatively, and instead you're just happy to see them, right? So why aren't we like that? We all know that that's how our neshama would like to be. We all know that, right? And we all know that, yes, my neshama is in an animal body. It's a nefesh ba'amit. It has an animal soul. It has a different agenda. So why is there the disconnect?
Well, your neshama is present. So that very moment is kind of like a renewed moment. It's not like holding on to past and judgments and
True.
expectations.
But why? So I know that, and you know that, right? So why do I get upset when somebody refuses to do me a favor? I know that I can. You just finished davening, okay? You just finished learning, and then you're sitting down to eat and drink, and You're eating and drinking the same like nobody, like the same like as if you never ever learned Torah. How come? Shouldn't your eating and drinking be different? If you study Torah, shouldn't your eating and drinking be different? Shouldn't the way you are, the way you work at the office or at your job, shouldn't it be different? And everybody agrees it should be. The question is, why not? And so the Rebbe Rashab explains, I was learning it last night with a friend, basically because we're operating in two disconnected spheres. I've got my spiritual side and I've got my physical side. Okay? And they're not connecting. They're not connecting. You know why they're not connecting? Because I'm not doing the work necessary to connect it. Okay? What's the work that needs to be done? Okay? The work that needs to be done, see, there's an expression in the Talmud, Adam karov etzel asmo. A person is close to himself. A person is close to his own self. If somebody's stepping on the toe of the person next to me, it doesn't hurt me. But if they step on my toe, it hurts me, right? Okay? Now, in English there's an expression, everybody lives in the castle of their skin. Right? In other words, how far am I sensitive? Till the edge of my skin, you know? Now, so why the disconnect between the mind, between the soul and the body? And the reason is because the soul has to work to make the connection. So let's say, for example, you're davening or studying Torah, and you're saying, "Wow, this is so awesome." Like, sometimes, for those of you who've sometimes been here 7:30 in the morning when we're learning Tanya, we're learning amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. It's like unbelievable, right? And then the class finishes, and then I go to have a drink, or to eat something, or to go daven, or whatever it is. And as I'm doing those physical things, it's as if I didn't learn anything. Yeah, I learned some things. I don't sit down next to Michal in the cafeteria and swipe things off his tray. So I learned something, you know what I mean? But I don't. But that's because I don't want to get into trouble. But why am I not having to connect? So the thing is that when you're in a high spiritual place, when you're praying, when you're learning Torah, or when you're doing mitzvahs, it's not enough to just meditate on the greatness and the beauty of what you're doing, but you also have to bring it down to your physical mind, so that your physical mind should also understand that this is beautiful, that your natural physical mind, in other words, not just in other words, the higher consciousness has to educate the lower consciousness. The higher consciousness has to come back from its high meditation and come back into the world, and it needs to speak to my midot. It's, hey, Shalom, Nefesh Abahami. You know what I learned today? I learned how beautiful it is to be kind. And I want you, the physical attribute of my being, my Nefesh Abahami, which possesses the ability to be kind, I want you to understand how beautiful it is to be kind. To be kind. I learned about Yirat Hashem. I learned about fear of God. It's amazing to experience awe of Hashem. Mr. Body, I want you to understand that and to be part of the experience. So when you make the connection, then the more frequently that you do that and the more intensely that you do that, the more your body is ready to hear the deeper side of life. But until your body is ready to hear the deeper side of life, it's a lot of work, a lot of intense work to actually make that come about. And the problem is not that. The problem is that even if we tried in the past, because it's a lot of work, we very likely gave up really working at it and getting through the barrier to actually achieve this. But it can be achieved. Okay? Now, when you start making the bridge between the body, between soul and body, so then everything that you do, whether you're eating or drinking or going to your job, whatever you're doing, is going to have at least a trace of the holiness that you got while learning and learning. But if we don't make that connection, if we don't make that bridge between soul and body, then the soul is going to do its thing, if it'll do anything, if the body will let it, and the body will do its thing, regardless of whatever experiences the neshama may have had. Because the neshama has to educate the body. It has to, because Hashem wants His presence to be present in the lowest of all places in this world, including He wants to be present in my physical being. Just thinking without talking. Okay.
And that's what consciousness comes in.
And this is all about consciousness, right? So if I go to the Kotel and I daven, but I don't feel any closer to anybody. I'm not thinking about anybody. I'm not thinking about the 6 million. I'm not thinking about people in my family, etc., etc. In other words, my consciousness is very, very limited. The reason it's limited is because I'm not doing the work to expand it.
And to be conscious, one needs to be conscious of where one is and where one is doing.
Conscious of your neshama.
Other than
Conscious.
Other than the Halakha, does an average person ever reach that level?
Anybody who wants to be an average person reaches that level. An average person can reach that level.
Well, it's a process.
Huh?
It's a process.
It's a process, but you have to learn the process. In other words, you have to learn how to do hitbonenut. You have to learn how to meditate, and you have to be a warrior in doing it. Warrior with an A. Like I once was giving a shiur in somebody's house, and I was talking about being a Jewish warrior, and there was this lady who was like shaking her head the whole time, and so her friend Marilyn says, Shalom, stop for a minute, and she says to I think her name was Elaine, what did Shalom say? And she says, Shalom says you have to be a Jewish warrior. Because she knew that her friend doesn't hear well. So she stopped to make sure that she's actually hearing what I said. And she's sitting there and she's shaking her head, yes, you have to be a Jewish warrior.
Oh no.
That's part of our culture, isn't it?
Right.
We don't have what to worry about, then we're not happy.
Right. Anyway.
One question.
Yes.
I thought that the first step when you pray or when you meditate is to connect to Hashem.
Depends. Look, we're going. Let me hear what you're saying. The first step really is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The very, very first step when you wake up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, the very first step is Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam, right? And how do you translate Modeh ani? So it's usually translated as I'm thankful that you've returned my soul. The deeper translation of Modeh ani is I admit that you, God, are the real reality, and that we really are the no thing. And so the first step is to start being conscious of the fact that, thank God, my soul has been returned. Okay. So what were you going to go on saying?
Yeah, I want to understand what you said before in a practical way. Like, I thought that, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that when I was praying or meditating, it was more like to feel God, to feel like
Right.
He's one.
Good. Good.
Okay. So if I do that, and let's say that if I'm lucky, I get to that point, and I go on to my activities, as you say, when is the time to do this connection that you're saying?
So practically speaking, okay, I don't know if you have time to do Hitbonenut meditation every day and so on, okay, but at least once a week on Shabbat or whatever. And these beautiful things that you're thinking about and that come to your mind when you're praying, so that it shouldn't be just a spiritual experience, but that spiritual experience should address the physical being, which is generally self-centered. Okay? It should address the physical being and explain to the natural mind that, it's much better to live this way and to do these things than to spend your life running after another swimming pool, or another car, or another this or another that. And convince your physical mind that this is much better.
Nice. There's two times kind of meditation. One is to
two parts, yeah.
God, and then the other one is how do I apply what
Exactly. So when somebody has done that efficiently, successfully over many, many years, they don't need to read this first paragraph. To them, Reb Shlomo didn't say anything new in this first paragraph. They don't need Reb Shlomo to tell them that the 6 million are on the kotel. They see it, they can experience it. Okay, I'm going to have to cut short today because I'm not managing to keep my focus because of the fast. Okay? I'll make it up later. You can stay 10 minutes later tomorrow. But no, I'm serious.